Joining us in the studio to discuss the latest ceasefire is the publisher Inside Watch Africa, Seyi Adeyemo. Good to have you join us.
Thank you.
Been a while, I have to say that.
It's been like forever.
Like forever. But let's talk about this, because this is quite a serious crisis in Africa. Everyone has been trying to mediate a ceasefire and even a political solution to the crisis. But the first milestone so far is the fact that they have been able to agree on a 7-day ceasefire. But when you look at the scale of humanitarian crisis, how much difference will this make?
That's the problem, the scale. So this is like maybe the 7th ceasefire that they've come to talk about. And people are so worried because you say to the people, you're ceasing fire, you're going to allow them to be able to go to market, to purchase, to be able to do a lot of things that they are unable to do right now. At the end of the day, there are bombings, all over the place, because you see, we're talking about people's life, and it's not enough to just talk or make pronunciations. We're talking about this affecting them on a daily basis. They're unable to live their lives. Like you said in your report, they're unable to go to banks, they're unable to trade, people are dying on the street. Those who ran to the borders are running back because it is worse in the border, because they don't have a place to stay. They're unable to have access to electricity. They don't have access to food. I mean, the truth of the matter is it is a very, very bad situation. So we're hoping and praying that this is not just going to be 7 days, because 7 days is nothing. Because when you say 7 days, 1 day is already gone, and 6 days, and are they saying they're going to go back to the bombings as it was before the ceasefire agreement?
I was just going to ask you that, because it would look like, the real issues have not been addressed. It's just, let's negotiate a time for to have a humanitarian corridor and then get food and shelter to people who need them. But that means that things could escalate further after the 7 days of ceasefire. What is the possibility of being able to negotiate another ceasefire if and when the need arises?
Our hope is that the rest of the world, particularly it's painful, because you see a lot of people are speaking to them, and it seems as if this is falling on deaf ears. And at the end of the day, you have a situation where two people, because of what they want, have thrown everybody into chaos. You see, we talk about Sudan, but we are really not talking about Ethiopia. We're not talking about Egypt. We're not talking about Libya. Chad. We're talking about Chad. And all of those people whose livelihood, whose food, trade has been, disrupted very heavily, and the world is coming out from all sorts of crises, and you're adding this to it because you say, I want my own group to be hung into the center, and so people should die, people's livelihood should be crushed. Sometimes this, for me, throw up the fact that, are we really sure the kind of leadership we're getting in Africa? Are they people who really understand that when they take certain decisions, it affects the whole of us, very negatively? Because at the end of the day, I mean, just imagine it. We come to work, we are doing our businesses, all of a sudden tomorrow morning, all of that is thrown into the air, and you don't know where to go, you don't know where to feed, you don't know where to live, it's horrifying. And we're just hoping that with all of this, pressure from AU, from United Nations, all of this, people will be able to impress and sort of sell some senses into the head of these leaders, because at the end of the day, they came together, chased the other leader out. Now they're at crossroads, and they're killing everybody as if they're talking about. Because you see, when you hear things like this, you begin to wonder: are we really understanding that we're talking about human beings, our lives, livelihoods, people's savings, people's story, people's life, people's dreams? I'm going to go into university, I'm going to own this, I'm going to do that. All of that is gone completely for a whole a whole nation.
And that is even a tall dream, to even be thinking about university at this point.
No, I'm saying those are
I'm even trying to paint, absolutely, because again, now you're even thinking about food and shelter.
Food and shelter.
But let's talk about, because you have raised a very critical point. When we talk about this war, we always paint a picture of the two warring factions, but both sides have continued to use civilians as targets. The civilians are bearing the brunt of this war. You hardly hear about the military infrastructure being targeted, but civilians have been targeted, and civilians have died. Both sides are trying to capture hospitals, to use as leverage when during talks. But how do you think that this should be addressed? And this, as many sides, are looking to mediate and find a political solution to this war.
Again, this takes us to a discussion we've had severally about what role or what power does the United Nations really, what do they have? What can they really do? Because sometimes you're wondering, are they just going to continue to plead, negotiate? Can they reprimand? Can they really sanction? Can they do things because you see, because you're a leader of a country does not mean that you're right. Can we have situations where we'll have them arrested? Sometimes because these are human beings. These are people who just have access to people. Because at the end of the day, when you arrest them and you take them to the court of arbitration, you begin to wonder, was that Superman that was doing all of that? They're now looking all cool and all that. So my question is, whilst they have all of this power, don't we have a means? Because you see, as long as there's no check, simply, all of us learned it when we were in school, that absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the idea of having a president, having all the power, and nobody can check them, and nobody can question them, for me, I think the world has gotten to a point where we need to start to look at that, look at what is happening between Ukraine and Russia. I mean, at the end of the day, this is just someone who feels that this is the way things should go, and because of that, thousands of people are dying every day, being destroyed. And like I said, all of this is affecting so many nations at the same time. And all of those, people are dying because certain people just don't understand that when they take a decision, it affects all of us. So I think that in whatever way we can impress it on them through all of this international organizations, because at the end of the day, their people cannot talk to them internally. They have strength. Yes.
You mentioned the United Nations. I was going to ask you, what about the African Union? Because the United Nations is even far-reaching. We have the African Union and other regional blocks and organizations.
The reason why it is clear that if the United Nations is unable to impress it on us, how much more the AU? Because at the end of the day, we all know that some of these people operate like they're civil servants. Because it is the head of states that contribute, into the coffers of those organizations, and in some way they just go there to talk. And sometimes I'm a little worried, as an individual, because one had expected that they are, one of the things they ought to do is policing and cautioning, such that there's some level of, caution. If you're president of any nation, when you want to take certain decisions, you're careful, because you know that those kind of organizations, African Union, European Union, or United Nations, can come in on behalf of the people, because at the end of the day, they are the ones that is going to manage the humanitarian problem, because they are the ones that's going to make sure that food is supplied and all those things are supplied. And so we allow them, kill them, only for us to look for food and shelter for them. I really don't understand the dynamics, but that's the way our world has been. And unfortunately, that is why we all will continue to pray that we never have bad leaders, because when we have them, this is what we pay for.
And we'll see if these organizations can take advantage of these 7 days of ceasefire to negotiate further. Always a pleasure to have to speak on these issues with you, publisher inside Watch Africa, Seyi Adeyemo.
Thank you so much for having me.